Hello, I am Jae-hee Lee, Head Instructor of Lee's Science Academy. This channel delivers basic knowledge of natural sciences logically and systematically, which is good to have before starting your major studies in college. It is not a lecture focused on simple memorization. In short, it is a channel for studying. Of course, it will also satisfy the intellectual curiosity of the general public, who want to systematically understand natural and biological phenomena. This channel is created and provided in South Korea. The narration is delivered using the voice of Iapetus, an AI model from Google Cloud. Thank you sincerely for visiting this channel, and I hope it will be helpful to you. Thank you. Today, before we officially start studying the logical framework of nature, we are uploading 3 videos on the epistemology of philosophy as a general liberal arts subject. The titles of the videos are Human Cognitive System and Cognitive Ability, Laws of Logic and Methods of Proof, Classification of Knowledge and Absolute Truth. Does just hearing the titles make your head ache? These topics belong to epistemology and philosophy, and if we go deep, the content is not simple. Here, we will narrow the scope and explore only enough to help you study science logically and systematically. Considering the content, the recording speed is slowed down a bit, so please adjust the playback speed if necessary. Students who are not familiar with this topic do not necessarily have to spend their limited time listening to it, so feel free to move on to the math video below in the description box, Creation of Natural Numbers. I will bring in and explain the necessary content for the science lectures as needed. For students interested in philosophy or those who have time to spare, it will not be a waste of time to listen to it once. Today's lecture title is Human Cognitive System and Cognitive Ability. We will focus on abstraction ability and logical thinking. This topic is not simple. Here, we will look at it briefly, just enough to understand the lecture. Here is the structure of today's video. We will explore the meaning of human existence within the universe. We will look at human intelligence and the cognitive system, focusing on human perceptual ability, and among the cognitive abilities related to the cognitive system, we will study the abstraction process. We will also explain logical thinking among cognitive abilities. We will explain how human intelligence and the cognitive system create knowledge, and the process by which knowledge is formed, so that you can understand it. First, let's consider what meaning humans have in the universe, and how human subjectivity is involved in the creation of the universe. To state the conclusion first, nature, or in other words, the universe we will study, does not exist absolutely and independently of humans, but is a subordinate entity created by humans. There are 2 meanings to the universe not being an objective absolute existence, but a subordinate entity to humans. First, since humans act as the subject, a world or universe without humans is meaningless. An object without a subject cannot exist. If I do not exist, nothing else can exist. This means that humans assign meaning to all things. Is this concept quite difficult? Let me give you an example. It was very recent that humans appeared on Earth. Think about the Earth or the universe in the past when there were no humans or life forms. Did the universe exist even then? Does it exist when there are no humans? What structure did the universe have then? Can we know? What meaning did it have? If you think deeply about it, it will not be easy to say that it exists or has meaning. The second meaning of humans as the creators of the universe is that the shape of the universe we currently learn and know does not exist objectively, but is a shape created by our cognitive system, a shape that corresponds to the human cognitive system. Expressed generally, the shape of the universe is subordinate to humans, the subjects. The four-dimensional spacetime currently understood or created by humans is a universe shape subordinate to humans and the human cognitive system. If there were life forms with completely different cognitive systems from humans, the shape of the universe they create could be different. Therefore, there is a human universe, a universe of other animals, and a universe of other cosmic life forms. Let me give you an example. When we say the Earth is round in the lecture, it is not aliens or apes speaking, but we humans living on Earth speaking to each other. We have created a human universe recognized as round according to the cognitive structure granted by the human cognitive system. If aliens or apes have cognitive systems different from humans, the shape of the space they perceive could be different, and in that case, they might not understand the concept of the word round. Everything we study is judged by humans based on the human cognitive system. Even if a cosmic life form exists and comes to Earth, communication might be difficult because their cognitive systems are different. When you listen to the lecture, please maintain the perspective that you are the subject, whether consciously or unconsciously. Here, we will look at human intelligence and the cognitive system. Human intelligence and the cognitive system are a very broad and difficult topic. Here, we will only briefly look at as much as necessary to understand the lectures of Lee's Science Academy. Have you ever wondered when humans started living on Earth? As the oldest ape whose remains were found on Earth, the genus Australopithecus is said to have lived about 3.5 million years ago. The genus here is the axle genus in the biological taxonomy of domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. At this time, there were no life forms that could be called humans. Homo habilis, a life form belonging to the Homo genus, the human genus, is said to have lived about 2.5 million years ago. Here, habilis means using hands or using tools. It means there were no life forms that used tools with their hands before that. Later, about 1 million years passed, and Homo erectus is said to have lived about 1.5 million years ago. Erectus means upright, meaning a life form that walks standing up. This means Homo habilis could not live standing perfectly straight. And modern humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, the species of organisms currently living on Earth, appeared on Earth approximately 40,000 years ago. Compared to the 4.56 billion year history of the Earth, the 40,000-year history of humanity is an extremely short period. The Neolithic Age, when they ground stones to make necessary tools, made vessels out of clay, and farmed, started about 10,000 years ago, so humans are essentially life forms that have lived since the Upper Paleolithic Age. Here, I would like to guide you to take an interest in numbers for a moment. As you study from now on, you will learn many numbers from very large to very small. Even if you don't memorize the numbers, please try to get a feel for the magnitude of the numbers. Thinking about the numbers regarding the history of the Earth and the emergence of humanity I just mentioned, when comparing the 4.56 billion year history of the Earth and the 40,000 year origin of humanity, the Earth's history is about 114,000 times longer than the origin of humanity. Even if you don't get a feel for it well, try to get a feel for it. Alternatively, human history is 8.8 times 10 to the power of -6 times the Earth's history. It is very good if you can have a sense of an exponent the size of -6 at this time. Returning to the topic, let's look at the similarities and differences between human intelligence and that of other animals like dogs and monkeys. The most significant similarity between humans and animals in intelligence is perceptual ability. Perceptual ability can be divided into sensory function, discernment function, and execution function. The sensory functions are the sensory organs: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, and it is the function of receiving stimuli through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. The discernment function can also be called judgment. It is the function of discerning and judging the differences between objects based on the received stimuli, and the execution function is the ability to determine and execute necessary actions based on discernment and judgment. In the perceptual ability to sense, discern, judge, and execute, the most important ability is the discernment that defines differences. If you look at the activities of wild animals shown in the animal kingdom, finding prey among various individuals and attacking to get food, you can clearly confirm this kind of perceptual ability of animals. Of course, if you observe the process of humans living their day-to-day lives, you can also confirm perceptual abilities in many aspects that are no different from animals. Let's look at what is different between humans and animals in terms of human intelligence. The biggest difference is that humans have cognitive abilities equipped with a highly advanced cognitive system. The human cognitive system includes at least 3 intellectual activities. First is logical thinking, second is abstraction ability, and third is memory ability. Because of this cognitive system, humans are capable of the intellectual activity of knowing something. Because this knowing is possible, we can create common knowledge, in other words, knowledge, that is widely accepted by many people. Then, let's examine what intellectual activities take place in the cognitive system to make it possible to know, to acquire knowledge. As we saw earlier, an animal's perception has a simple form leading from sensation through simple discernment straight to execution. On the other hand, human cognitive ability creates a comprehensive cognitive system based on reason, which only humans possess. Unlike the primary perception of animals, the human cognitive system discerns all things with a high degree of discernment through abstraction. A high degree of discernment through abstraction can be compared to creating a kind of virtual world. In addition to abstraction ability, the human cognitive system also possesses logical thinking. This logical thinking ability judges that the contents discerned are not wrong but right, making it possible to know. The act of humans knowing is a truly marvelous phenomenon. In conclusion, humans have a cognitive system, so they make judgments that something is right and acquire knowledge. If there were no cognitive system, we could not weigh and judge, so knowing would be difficult. Let's look at the first component of the cognitive system, the abstraction ability. This process is very important, so please understand it well. Abstraction can be broadly divided into 3 processes. The first is the conceptualization stage, where, when given an object, we find the differences or commonalities of that object and discern it. The second is the stage of assigning a name that distinguishes the concept discerned in the first stage from others. The third is the stage of expressing it with a symbol by assigning a single symbol to the named object. Therefore, the abstraction process broadly consists of three elements: concept, name, and symbol. The three-stage process of abstraction is probably something you are hearing and thinking about for the first time, but it is very important, so let's look at it more specifically with an example. Here are four objects or real entities. Can you discern them all as different? Then you have completed the first stage. Since they are distinguishable, you assign different names in words, such as rose, sunflower, tulip, and lily, completing the second stage. Finally, if you express the discerned objects with symbols, the third stage is completed, and the abstraction process ends. Since letters are also excellent symbols, expressing them in English such as rose, sunflower, tulip, and lily becomes a symbolic expression. You understand well, right? You can also discern them by commonalities. Finding the commonality that they are all reproductive organs of plants is the first stage discernment concept work, and assigning the common name flower in words is the second stage work. If you express that name with its own letter symbol, the word flower, the abstraction process is complete. Do you understand? Among the stages of abstraction, let's look more specifically at deepened discernment. Finding the differences or characteristics that distinguish an individual object from others, or finding commonalities among multiple objects, is deepened discernment. In the deepening of discernment, please strongly feel the sense of extracting or pulling out differences from within the object. For humans to recognize that something exists is premised on distinguishing the characteristics of the object being recognized from other entities, so without the abstraction ability to discern the object, the individual existence itself cannot be recognized. From a human perspective, if there is no difference, it does not exist. If there is no difference, it cannot be distinguished, so it is the same as not existing. It is very important to understand this content well, so let me explain with an example. Humans can distinguish this desk and that chair because their characteristics are different. You distinguish them too, right? This apple and that banana can also be distinguished because their characteristics are different. Also, the desk and chair have the same characteristics as furniture, and the apple and banana have the same characteristics as fruit, and furniture and fruit can be distinguished as different from each other. If we cannot distinguish them, they are all the same entities, like monkeys in a zoo, so monkeys exist, but individual monkeys do not. Because we cannot discern the differences between individual monkeys, we cannot distinguish them, so they do not exist. Of course, to a zookeeper who distinguishes the differences, individual monkeys can have names and exist as individuals. Now, is it well understood that if there is no difference, it cannot be distinguished, so it does not exist? Another characteristic of the abstraction ability is the creation of virtual entities. The creation of virtual entities is producing abstracts purely through thought. It is not finding characteristics in actually existing objects or things, but a creative ability that generates discernment concepts solely with cognitive ability in a state where there is no existing physical entity. It is not finding differences or commonalities in actual objects like desks or chairs, but creating something out of nothing. Concepts like human dignity, freedom, equality, human rights, beauty, love, and mercy cannot be found no matter how much you look around. Because they are created only in the human mind, All abstract nouns belong to this category. You understand, right? Besides abstract nouns, numbers like 1, 2, 3 are also 100% abstracts created through the abstraction process. We will look closely at the abstract nature of numbers in the first math video, Creation of Natural Numbers. At this stage, we can define an important term widely used in mathematics and science: definition. Assigning a name to the final concept created by the abstraction process explained earlier is called definition. This expression is the definition of a definition. The English verb is define, and the noun is definition. The word definitions for flowers, roses, chairs, human dignity, human rights, etc., mentioned earlier, are the concepts conceptualized by discernment at first. The word explanations in the dictionary are the concepts and definitions of the first stage of the abstraction process. Definitions of terms are so important that it can be said that all science starts from definitions. Therefore, it is extremely important, especially for students, to make it a habit to clearly organize the concept represented by every term they use. When pondering a definition, do not ask, "What does this word mean?" It is more effective to organize your thoughts in the direction of, through the abstraction process, what concept was intended to be expressed by this word. So please do it this way from now on. For example, regarding the concept and definition of energy, do not ask what energy means, but ask what concept was referred to as energy. To understand the abstraction process more broadly, let's also take a look at how the abstraction process occurs in the field of art. First, looking at the abstraction process in music, when a musician grasps a certain concept and tries to express it with symbols, the symbols used by the musician would be the musical score consisting of a staff and notes. You understand, right? Beethoven expressed a certain concept he discerned through 9 symphonies. Because the concepts Beethoven wanted to convey in his 9 symphonies were all different, like apples and bananas, Beethoven created them as different symphonies. For example, the opening of Symphony No. 5, Fate, is like this. And the opening of Symphony No. 9, Choral, is like this. Beethoven expressed them differently depending on the difference in the concepts he wanted to convey. Also, Han So-sung, the Korean composer of Cheer Up Dad, expressed the first part of his recent work YOLO like this. All of these show the differences in the concepts the musicians want to convey. Let's look at the field of art as well. For a painter, the basic means of expression, the third stage of the abstraction process, would be lines and colors. For musicians, it was sheet music. Spanish painters Picasso and Goya, they are very famous artists. If you are interested, please look them up. They extract specific concepts differently from the great disaster of war, and they also express those different concepts differently. Picasso expressed the barbarity of war with Guernica, and Goya expressed the disasters of war with 82 prints. This is the 5th print. You understand, right? This is the abstraction process. Please understand it well. It is time to learn about the second ability of the cognitive system, logical thinking. But before looking at the specific contents of logical thinking, let's define one term. Human intelligence connects various concepts created through the abstraction process to express new concepts. If the content of a new concept expressed by a human can be judged as true or false, we will call that new expression a proposition. We will look at the properties of propositions separately in the math lectures, but here please understand it as an expression that can be judged as true or false. For example, the expression Lee's Science Academy lectures on the logical framework for nature can be judged as true or false, and since the content is correct, it becomes a true proposition. The expression Lee's Science Academy lectures on law and politics can be judged as true or false, so it becomes a proposition, but since the content is false, it becomes a false proposition. However, the expression Lee's Science Academy's lectures are excellent cannot be clearly judged as true or false, so even if one person says it is excellent and another says it is not, it cannot be said to be wrong, so it does not become a proposition. Also, the expression 3 plus 3 equals 6 can be distinguished between true and false and judged as true, so it is a true proposition. The expression adding 4 to 3 makes 9 also becomes a false proposition that can be clearly judged as true or false. Understanding propositions is also very important, so you must firmly engrave the definition. This time, it is the second ability of the cognitive system, logical thinking. Logical thinking is the ability to think logically. Then, what exactly does it mean to think logically? In the Korean dictionary, logic is explained as the process or principle of leading thoughts or inferences logically in speech or writing. Are the explaining words harder? Here, we will focus on the expression logically. And in Lee's Science Academy, we will not talk about how humans came to have logical thinking ability, because it's too difficult. We will only deal with how human logical thinking ability works from a practical perspective. Humans, possessing a cognitive system based on reason, unlike animals, can divide all propositions into categories to judge them. First, we can judge regarding truth, whether a new concept or proposition expressed or created by a human is true or false. Or we can judge regarding goodness, the goodness or wickedness of an action, whether it is right or wrong. We can also judge regarding beauty, whether an object is beautiful or ugly. At this time, what is needed to logically reason and judge without relying on intuition or mood is logical thinking. Therefore, to properly judge true and false, right and wrong, and beauty and ugliness, the power to think logically must be supported. It means you have to present such and such true propositions to judge it as good or wicked, and present such and such true propositions to judge it as beautiful or ugly. However, judging whether a certain expression or action is right or wrong, beautiful or ugly, belongs to the realm of ethics or justice. It belongs to the realm of ethics, justice, or aesthetics, so it can be said to be outside the realm of science, which determines cause and effect. So from now on, Lee's Science Academy will strictly limit it to judging only whether a new concept or expression is true or false. Earlier, I said that Lee's Science Academy only judges true and false, so let's define one more new term here. From now on, judging whether a given proposition is true or false through logical thinking will be called proving. All the knowledge learned in the lectures of this channel is expressed as propositions. Therefore, studying would be the process of proving that a proposition is true through logical thinking. The English verb is prove, and the noun form is proof. From now on, we will express it as PF in mathematics. If we prove that a proposition is true through study, we accept that proven proposition as knowledge. Therefore, if you complete all the courses at Lee's Science Academy in the future, you will have the ability to judge whether all the propositions you learn are true or false. Based on what we have reviewed so far, I would like to briefly examine the process by which knowledge is formed. To summarize what we have learned so far, knowledge is a proposition proven to be true through logical thinking. The important task here is, when a proposition is given, knowing how to think logically and how to prove it. Through this process we acquire knowledge. We will review logical thinking methods and proof methods in the next video, and here we will just give one simple example to experience logical thinking and proof methods. The expression we all know well, "the sun rises in the east," is a proposition because true and false can be distinguished, and this proposition includes the definition of the sun and direction, the abstraction process for the sun and direction. Based on this definition and experience, we accept this proposition as true. Because we have experienced that the object defined as the sun always rises from the direction defined as the east, we judge this proposition to be true, judge that it has been proven, and accept it as knowledge. The logical basis for proof applied here is the empirical fact that in our experience so far, there has never been a case where the sun did not rise in the east. So when someone asks, "Which direction does the sun rise?" you answer, "East," without hesitation, and are confident that you answered correctly. So far, we have explored the process of acquiring knowledge by discerning what is right and what is wrong with abstraction and logical thinking. And we will look at the third cognitive ability, memory, in another video. In the next class, we will look at the 3 laws of logic we can rely on to think accurately and logically: the law of identity, the law of contradiction, and the law of excluded middle. And we will also learn how to prove that a given proposition is true based on the laws of logic. Then, I will end today's lecture here. Thank you.